Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we are going to drive the Mazda MX-30. Now the name might not sound familiar because this is a brand new car from the Japanese manufacturer, and it's their first attempt at making an electric vehicle. The fact that it's a crossover tells you rather a lot about the state of the business these days. If Mazda decided to make its first electric car a crossover, it's pretty obvious what kind of cars are being bought in the industry nowadays. So what about the car itself? It's based on the same platform as the CX-30, and in terms of the size of the car, they are very similar. Even the design looks a lot similar on the two. And the MX-30 is not a lot different compared to the rest of the Mazda range. You'll still notice the Kodo design language on it. So up front, there is a important difference compared to most SUVs Mazda has these days. And I'm talking about the front grille. Now, on the MX-30, the front grille is a lot smaller. There are two reasons for that. First of all, you don't need cooling under the hood because you have an electric motor. You don't need that much cooling compared to a regular internal combustion engine. And second of all, the car is more aerodynamic because of it. So you have a smaller grille up front. Other than that, the headlights have a slightly different shape, but overall look very much the same as on the CX-30. Look very good, and the front end is very streamlined. You have a turn signal light on the lower side of the bumper, and you'll also notice these black huge protection mud guards all around the car. The main goal of them being to protect this paint. Now on this particular tester we have a very expensive paint. This tritone gray paint is 2,000 euros. It's an optional extra, so it's very expensive. We also have gloss gray wheels on this car that are also an optional feature. And from the side, you'll notice that it has a coupe-like roofline. You'll notice the Mazda badges over here and the electric badge and the mirror opening doors. Now, this rear hinged door is not a new thing. The BMW i3 did it the first time, but I would say Mazda took a bold approach here. They could have learned from the experience of the BMW i3, but they didn't. The main issue with this door is that it's very hard to get people in the back. But considering how limited the room is in the back, if I adjust my driver's seat in my comfortable driving position, I'm 6 feet tall and about 250 pounds, I can't fit in the back. So you need very small adults or children. If they're over the age of 14, most likely they won't fit in the back. So most likely Mazda created this car to be used in the city by 1 or 2 people at most. That's why the rear hinged doors won't make a huge difference. But if you want to get in the back, you have to open the front door, open the rear door, close the rear door, and then close the front door. It's a quite complicated process. Furthermore, the front seat belts are hooked up in the rear door. So if you have someone in the back who wants to get out, the front passenger has to take out his or her seat belt. Yeah, quite tricky. Around the back, the design is also familiar. It's also part of the Kodo design language. You'll find the taillights have a slightly different shape than on the CX-30, but not by a lot. But overall, everything looks the same, and the boot is quite small even for this segment. It has 361 liters or 340 liters, depending on the kind of rear bench setup you go for. If you go for the 4-seater, you have 20 liters more than on the 5-seater version. Inside the cabin, the similarities continue. So you'll notice that the MX-30 has a similar design to the one found on the CX-30, and that's actually normal. The one difference you'll notice will be in the center console area, where we have a floating center console. Of course, it's not floating, but it has a design that basically tricks you into thinking that. It looks good. The plastic could be of better quality, but it's not bad. And you have the control buttons for the infotainment system over here. The infotainment system is exactly the same as on any other Mazda right now. The one difference you have is that instead of the classic HVAC controls over here, you have a screen. I don't know why they did that. I guess it's because they wanted to create this floating center console design, but I much prefer the buttons. So this screen will allow you to adjust various settings about the HVAC system. The problem is you'll have to take your eyes off the road to do that. So you need to keep that in mind. You also get Android Auto and Apple Carplay connected with a wire. The main problem with that is that the screen, the infotainment screen, is not touch sensitive, so you'll have to use this rotary knob over here to control the functions in the Android Auto or Apple Carplay, and that also distracts you from the road. So I suggest you do that only when you're stationary. The steering wheel is rather good, and I have to mention the materials inside. Now, we have we have eco leather on the seats, and this textile material also has strains of plastic from recycled PETs, recycled plastic bottles. The materials on most surfaces are okay. This plastic over here is rather scratchy. This plastic over here is better, but still not of the best quality. And on the doors, we have trims made of recycled plastic once again. So it's pretty obvious Mazda was trying to create a sustainable interior. But the biggest highlight here is the cork trims. So this over here and on the inside of the door handles is cork. And you might wonder, why is Mazda using cork? Well, before Mazda became a car maker, they were a cork making company. So they used to make this over 100 years ago. It's a nice throwback, if you ask me, and I do appreciate it. These are some pretty interesting cup holders. You can cover them up using these cork trims. One last mention, the instrument cluster is partly digital, partly analog. On the left side, you have a power indicator, which shows you just how much of the car's resources you're using. And on the right side, you have a state of charge indicator and a temperature indicator. In the middle, we have a digital display, a speedometer, which can change its appearance to show different information about the car. And that's about it. I would get in the back, as I usually do in my reviews, but I'm afraid I don't fit. It's quite narrow in there, and the problem is if I adjust my my seat, my front seat, to my comfortable driving position, I don't fit in the back. So in order to be able to fit in there, you'd have to be pretty small as an adult, or you'd have to be a kid. When driving the new Mazda MX-30, you instantly notice a couple of familiar Mazda things. First of all, you notice the seating position. Even though this is a crossover SUV style car, you're sitting really low, and I was surprised by how low the seating position is. You feel in command all the time, and the seats are very comfortable. For a SUV of this size, you're sitting very low, including the fact that you have a rather big battery package hidden in the floor. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about the technical side of things. Under the hood, we have an electric motor which has a lot of space around it. It's actually quite interesting how the whole thing under the hood looks like. That's capable of developing 145 horsepower and 265 Newton meters of torque. That power is sent exclusively to the front wheels and is meant to keep this car going for up to 200 kilometers on a single charge, according to Mazda and the WLTP testing cycle. Well, that doesn't really add up. The battery under the floor measures up to 35.5 kilowatt hours of energy stored, but out of that you can only use 30 kilowatts. So you need to keep that in mind. How about the energy consumption? Well, during my time with the car, the weather was absolutely gruesome. It snowed, it rained, it was cold. So the numbers I'm gonna tell you should be taken as a worst case scenario. So around town, my average consumption was 20 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered. That should give you a range of about 150 kilometers, which is 25% less than what you would expect, considering the car is rated for 200 kilometers. But considering the weather, considering the fact that it snowed almost all the time, I think these are not all that bad, are not terrible results. Outside the city limits, at an average speed of around 40 to 50 miles an hour, the average consumption was 21 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers covered. But the weather was still very, very bad. Lots of crosswinds, lots of snow. I had to keep the heater on. I have winter tires on and so on. So you get about 140 kilometers of range, which is, once again, considering the conditions, trust me, they were rather dreadful. It's not a bad result. Among other things, I had to keep the wipers on, the defrosting on, and so on. I think since we're only 25% off from the official claims, the results are actually pretty good. I mean, they're not record-breaking. The energy consumption is rather high, but Mazda at least didn't lie about its results. So it's pretty honest about saying, look, this is the car we made. It's going to be carrying you for 200 kilometers on a charge. That's it. We're not all that far off from the official results, so I can't really fault Mazda for that. What I can fault Mazda for is the long charging time. So this car can be charged using a AC socket, which will take up to 11 kilowatts out of an AC charger, or it can recharge itself using a fast charger, which can go up to a total power of 37 kilowatts. So most fast chargers have at least a power of 50 kilowatts. This car can only take 37 of those. And normally you would think, you know what, that's okay, the battery isn't all that big anyway, so if I use a 50 kilowatt charger, the car can take up to 37, it will be able to take 37, so it should be recharged in about an hour. Well, that's in theory, because in practice, just like any other electric car out there, this car has a buffer and it will slow down the speed of charge over 80%. So once you hit 80% battery charge, the power will slow down, will go down to protect the batteries. And the remaining 20% will be charged in about an hour and a half. So yeah, you will get up to 80% rather fast in about 30-40 minutes, but after that, to have a full battery, you would have to spend another hour and a half in the parking lot charging your car. And that's unacceptable in my book. I had to charge this car 3 times yesterday, and I wasted about 6 hours doing so because I wanted to get good consumption figures. And since the range is so limited, I had to charge it like often. So yeah, it's disappointing. But my feeling is Mazda created this car to be a city car, to be used mostly around town. That's why the range shouldn't bother its customers, and that's why the charging time shouldn't be an issue, because if you're using this car as a city car and you can charge it at home or at work, the charging time won't really matter because you're going to be spending at least 8 hours at work. That's what normal people do anyway. So you'd have plenty of time to charge it, and you'd also spend, let's say, 8 hours at home sleeping. So if you can charge it at home, that wouldn't be a problem either. So you have these questions right now about what was Mazda thinking with this range and this charging power. And I think that's what they thought about. This is supposed to be, if you're looking to buy a Mazda MX-30, you should probably think of it as a city car. And for that, it's actually quite decent. You have great visibility all around, nice turning radius. The suspension is not too soft, not too harsh, it's supple. It's just as you would expect it to be. It reminds me a lot of the CX-30, but with a bit more rigidity added on top, because this car has an extra 300 kilos of batteries right here. It's very quiet. The suspension is well muffled out, very well sound insulated. Not a lot of noise gets through into the cabin, and it's quite a nice car to drive. It's not necessarily a fast car or a sports car, but I love the suspension because it's one of the best in an electric car I've had the pleasure of driving so far, with a passive system, because this car doesn't have adaptive dampers. So it's a great setup as a passive system overall. I actually love the suspension on this car. Driving it fast, you'll notice the lack of weight on the front axle. The car will understeer and will lose its front mechanical grip at times. Not a big issue if you ask me, because nobody is going to drive this car in a sporty manner, because they will always keep an eye on the battery and the state of charge. That said, this has been my review of the Mazda MX-30. Hope you guys have a better idea right now about how it is to live with it, what kind of range you should expect out of it, and all other details. If you're interested in buying one, I'm sure you have plenty more questions. Don't forget to drop them in the comment section below, and I am more than happy to answer them all. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, of course, subscribe, click the notification bell so you're up to date with every single upload I make. And yeah, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.